Welcome to Coffee and Pizza. I hope you can enjoy.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Coffee and Pizza. And for today, we have someone very, very special, the founder of RunZero, and a lot of highlights. And I prefer you can introduce yourself. Have a pleasure to keep you here, AG more, and I love it. Thank you very much to stay here.
Cool. Thanks, Albert. Yeah, so for folks who don't know me, HD Moore, co-founder and CEO of RunZero. Most folks probably know me better for my work on Metasploit for about 15 years, running that project, starting it, all that fun stuff, working with the community. But yeah, thanks for having me here.
No, it's my pleasure, and I believe that highlight it's incredible, right? Because you don't have the possibility many days to know people from Metasploit, and you are one of the creators, we can say, of the because after 15 years there, it's like crazy, right? You have a lot of time behind. You are maybe one of maybe the first kids they are working, right? But anyway, many people don't know about you, and I believe it's important also before to know the hacker, know the person. And that's one of the beautiful things I want to do here. I want to know about you. From where are you from?
I've got a strange background. So I grew up in Hawaii for the first 7, 8 years, and then I basically bounced everywhere: New York, California, Texas, Arizona. I think I went to probably 12, elementary schools. I ended up going back to Austin and basically being in Austin, Texas for the last 20, 30 odd years. But even here, like I went to 6 high schools, right? So one thing about moving a lot is every time you move to a place, you're always the new kid. And what happens to the new kid? Well, they get picked on. And you get picked on so many times, so many different places, you start getting really scrappy. And the scrappy you get, the more you get kicked out because you're starting fights. So I spent a lot of time as a kid showing up in a new school, getting bullied, punching somebody, then basically getting thrown out of that school and going someplace else. And then lots of other stuff, right? But it's just kind of one of the downsides of always moving is you always kind of feel like you're the new person everywhere you go. And I think in a lot of ways it also affected my view of security. When I was kind of coming up in the security community, kind of mid '90s, late '90s, I knew a lot of folks that were like the cool kids, and they would all hang out with all the different groups, LSD, ADM, TESO, all those folks. But I was not a cool kid. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends there. So I always kind of felt like an outsider through it, where the folks I always thought as being like the smart people who could write cool exploits were always like 3 or 4 years ahead of me and wouldn't talk to me, and like we're not really accessible. So I was, one of those things where early on I said, okay, well, if I can't be friends with the cool kids, I'll build my own cool kid stuff. I'm gonna make my own exploits, make my own tools, because I just don't like that the feeling of constantly feeling kind of excluded from the elite groups back then got annoying, and that was kind of one of the reasons for starting Metasploit, which is like we're gonna write as many exploits as we can and give them out to everybody all the time for free, and just get rid of this whole elitism BS that kind of pervaded the security community in the early days.
We can say at the time maybe you was a script kiddie and you want to go to one step forward or one step something like that, right? Because many people when you use Metasploit, most of the people say, "Wow, you are a script kiddie," but I believe like use the tools of another one. It can be very interesting, and also the approach you having into this tool, right? And I believe that's why when Warren's Metasploit, same as you was mentioned, like it's a tool for help the people, right? Then I believe it's totally legit if you use one of that tools, right?
Yeah, I
I
mean, it's one
believe
of those,
that's your main idea when you create the tool, right?
yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are or how much you know. Like, you don't want to learn the specifics of every single tool you use, right? Like, if you get a vacuum cleaner and you want to vacuum the floor, you don't need to know how the vacuum works. Now, if your job is to make vacuum cleaners, hopefully, you know a little more. But kind of the genesis behind Metasploit was I was working in a company where we were doing pen test all the time, and we were using the standard exploits you find on the internet, packet storm, millworm, all that stuff back then. We're building our own tools here and there. We weren't particularly good at it, but we're making our own. And it was really messy. Like all the tools were broken. They had hard coded shell code. It was a pain to fix offsets. If you wanted to change something from like a bind shell to a reverse shell, you had to basically re-encode the entire exploit. Get rid of all the null bytes, things like that. It was really difficult to like fix the payloads of these hard coded exploits. And while there's some commercial tools, like we couldn't afford them. Like Core Impact, I think it was in beta in 2002 when we started working on kind of the early days of Metasploit. And like, there's no way in hell I could have ever afforded Core Impact. Like just at the company I was at, our team, et cetera. So, we really built something internally for our own team to use. And then, of course, the company I was working at said, no, we don't want you working on that during your work time. I was like, really? But we need this for a job. Like, this is how we're going to do our pen test. And they said, no, you can't work on that at work. I'm like, fine. Okay, so I spent every night and weekend for the next 15 years working on it, and it's fine. Like I think at that point it was great because I left that company and I kept working on Metasploit. And one of the great things about open source is you kind of take it with you wherever you go. You're not like leaving it behind to be part of your company's repository or GitHub. You're able to kind of take your code and keep working on it no matter where you work. And that's the great thing that I really like about open source. And it worked, early on. I think the tools were not particularly good. My first exploit for like the Apache Win32 chunked exploit, I think said like 50 megabytes of web requests to every request. It was a terrible exploit. I mean, it got the job done eventually, but it was terrible and ugly. And by the time we get to 2009, 2010 or so, some of the exploits of Metasploit were just so magical. Like the MSO8067 vulnerability that we exploited in Metasploit, it did so much fingerprinting. Like we had a database of every offset, every shellcode bit you had to do for every OS, for every language pack. It would identify the exact language pack windows, exploit it perfectly every time. So it's kind of a long jump from 2002, 2003, where we're just kind of throwing things together to get to work, to later on when we've just so dialed in the exploits, the payloads, and coders. Oftentimes, early on, the Metasploit was much worse than the cool kids exploits. By the time we get to like 2008, 2009, it's actually a lot better than most of the commercial tools. A lot of our exploits could do things that the commercial tools couldn't. It got to the point that some of the people we're competing with, if you will, on the commercial front, started just embedding Metasploit into their commercial exploit tools because to fill the gaps, right? So it was a fun project. Like I needed a break from it, so I took a break back in 2016 just to step away and do something else for a bit. But I really liked working on it. It was quite a lot of fun to work with the community all day, and sorry for rambling, but one of the things I really liked about Metasploit was you get to know so many people. All the community people who are trying to learn how exploits work, trying to get into security, they would reach out to us, be like, "Hey, how do I use this thing?" Or "This thing doesn't work for me. How do I fix it?" And we were able to get about 300, 400 people early on as contributors to a project, and a lot of those folks turned around and used it as a reference for their resume, helped them get jobs. It was like a kind of a thing they could point to and say, "Look, I did this thing, therefore I'm qualified to be in security." So it's a great way for folks to kind of like get their careers going as well.
Of course, I believe always can be a good, how can I say, a good highlight in putting your resume. You was contributing to maybe for 1 year, not maybe 15 years in your case. It's maybe too much, but we can say like it can be interesting for many companies because same as you were mentioned, like it's when you work in an open source community, always will be your code, and wherever you want to go, it's what will be your code. I know it's like pain in your ass when you need to work on that like extra time or something like that, but sometimes you don't have motivation or something like that, or maybe it's your main motivation. But I believe after 15 years, like in your case, finding motivation sometimes can be a little bit hard, right? I don't know, but that's a question.
I mean, one thing I really liked about Metasploit is every time you work on an exploit, you're effectively proving someone wrong. So, if there's a vendor that says, "We've got this secure software," you say, "No, it's not. Here's a shell." Like, it's great. And you can't argue with a shell. Like, so I like the fact that like you can do something that's provable, you can prove the value, you can prove the impact you're doing. And it's kind of a little bit, pushing against the marketing and all the other stuff you see out there. If you look at the last 3 years in particular, where companies are getting breached now is often their security product, which doesn't make any sense at all. I'll pick on Palo Alto. They had a vulnerability in their Global Protect VPN endpoint. It was identified Thursday. It was being exploited in the wild. No one patched it till the next week. So you had an entire weekend of people just like shelling everyone's external Palo Alto firewalls through the VPN service that you couldn't disable because that's how you get to it. That's the way you're going to manage it. So it's that was not a good example for the security industry of providing security for our customers, but we're seeing that more and more. We're seeing more folks selling security products that themselves are the biggest security risk of the organization. And what I liked about Metasploit is that we're able to kind of take everyone down a notch and say, it doesn't matter how secure you think your product is, here's the proof in the pudding. Here's an actual exploit. Here's an actual shell for it. And because there's an open source project, the vendors can't really do much about it. They can threaten to sue you. They try to get me fired. They try to like ruin my career many times early on. But end of the day, it's in a public repository. Like you can't stop it. What we found out early on is that vendors will apply tons of pressure to prevent you from disclosing a vulnerability up to the point that it's already public. Once it's public, there's really nothing else they can do. There's no point in going after you anymore. So we found that like our best bet was just to oftentimes in some cases not tell the vendor at all because we don't want to get pressured. We just dump the vulnerability, tell them about it, and go on your day. So that's very different than how a lot of folks think of like responsible disclosure. And my perspective there is like responsible to who? Responsible to their users, responsible to the vendor, responsible to yourself, responsible to your friends. Like, so, I tend to think of responsible disclosure as a term as being kind of an epithet, kind of not a great way to describe what's happening. A lot of folks use coordinated disclosure today too, but there's nothing inherently, morally good about coordinated disclosure. End of the day, you're showing that there's a problem in a product. You don't actually owe the vendor anything. The vendor is selling a product. They're telling their customers are secure. They're responsible for securing that software. You don't work for them. Your job as a researcher is to find problems and help your customers mitigate them. You have no responsibility to make other people's products better. So just keeping that in mind, like as a security researcher, don't get gaslit into thinking that you work for the vendors. Don't think that you have to do quote unquote responsible disclosure where the vendor controls your discourse. It's your bug. You found it. You saw a little bit of pushback kind of in the mid 2000s, 2010s, where the no more free bugs campaigns, where folks were like, hey, we're just not going to share bugs anymore. Like if the vendor is going to treat us as poorly, folks are going to go after us for trying to share research. Like how about we just stop sharing research? How about we start selling those 0 days instead? And there's been a big trend to start selling 0 days in the various markets instead, just because of how folks are treated. Now I will say the silver lining though is now we've got bug bounty programs, and that's just its own world of chaos, and I love it. I love the fact that when I was growing up, if you had any experience with pen testing in 1998, you were a criminal before then, because there's no other way to get that experience. Like you had to have been breaking into stuff you didn't have access to early on, because there wasn't a pen test lab in 1998. Like if you're really lucky, you had a job that let you do offensive security, but those jobs are really rare. So if you knew anybody in 1998 to 2002, 3-ish, who was really good at breaking into stuff, it wasn't because they had a job doing so. They might have a job now, but they didn't start off that way, right? So these days is a little different. Like when I started off, the stuff I was playing around with, like exploring networks and machines, like if I got in trouble for it, it'd be a felony. That's not great. These days, if you want to go hack a Fortune 500 company, go find their bug bounty program and go to town. And you're actually not really at much risk. Like as long as you're not DDoSing it or doing something completely against like the bug bounty terms of service, like it's kind of a free world. You can go out there and do active security testing of any corporate entity for the most part without permission in advance, which is amazing. So the world's a lot different these days for being able to safely explore and build up your security skills. Then you've got great things like CTFs. You've got these great training resources. So it's a little bit different in that sense that, kind of the early days, anybody who was good at it was basically putting their own, freedom at risk to get there. And these days, there's a lot of other resources. But yeah, it's been fun. So on one hand, disclosure started off being really terrible in the early 2000s. I think Metasploit really helped folks accept that, it doesn't matter what the vendors think. Whoever finds the bug gets to do what they want. And that was kind of the point. Like we did the month of browser bugs. We dropped a 0 day on a Microsoft product every single day for a month. And then they killed ActiveX afterwards. And we're like, success. We made an impact. We got rid of ActiveX. That was worth it. So I feel like the trends have definitely changed quite a bit. We're now seeing kind of a pushback where vendors are now having a little more control. They're now doing a lot more pressure. Bug bounty programs are being used to control disclosure as well. Folks will say, well, you joined our bug bounty program and we'll pay you $5, but therefore you can't disclose it. It's like, that may not be worth $5 to not disclose it. Like, I'm not sure that's a good trade-off. So there's definitely that kind of push and pull these days, but I am very happy that if you want to get into offensive security, if you want to learn how to write exploits, you want to learn how to like break into stuff, you can do so legally, safely, and much easier than before.
Wow, man, you open a lot of lines now for questions. I believe we can talk about that, but crazy. But the first thing you say, like, okay, maybe the companies don't take the first day to try to solve the issue or try to patch the insecure software, we can say. But if you do something like that, you have the problem like CrowdStrike. Then sometimes it's quite complicated how you apply the patch, and maybe better you can get a 0 day or 1 day click or something like that. Sometimes it's complicated because, as you mentioned, but one of the things you was telling, and I believe is very, very interesting is like how the companies, like the private companies, is taking care of the software. That's something like you live. I wrote an article talking about the fake feeling of security. It's like many companies, many big corporations is buying software, buying solutions from we can say Palo Alto in the case because you was talking about Palo Alto, and you have the feeling like, oh wow, everything is secure. But I work in cybersecurity as you, and I have friends have a lot of bugs and 0 days from Palo Alto reported to Palo Alto and never fix it, and it's still there. And this is the fake feeling of cybersecurity, the security, right? Because you are telling something very interesting. For who is the responsibility in that moment? And we can say that in the bug bounty programs, like how many people is running bug bounty programs and finding some vulnerabilities very interesting or very important vulnerabilities that is not fixed. But who is the responsibility of that? If someone have some benefits or maybe do exploit of the company or something like that, because it's out of the scope. Yeah, but you are not protecting the scope. You are protecting people. And most important thing, that you are protecting lives. Because if someone enters your bank account and stole all your savings of your life, It's like crazy, and that can happen. From who is the responsibility if someone reports the bug? Like that's a very very important point of view, and I'm agree totally with you. And same with you was speaking before, like about the when we was younger, because I born in 1983, and I have the same feeling like you. I was working as a cyber criminal when I was hacker. Like no one was hacker, more in Spain, because maybe United States you have another community and English speakers, but here in Spanish speakers like crazy. And my ability to speak Spanish, to speak English in when I was younger was so complicated, and I can understand totally your point of view. And for this, in my opinion, your contribution to the community is it's very important in the point you was working before. But we have many points open, and we can talk about bounty later and how the companies trade that things. And but one of the things I believe is important, what's been you to create that? Like what the things happens in your life to say, wow, I want to be hacker? You tell me, okay, I have a very complicated or difficult life because it's difficult to make friends when you are moving constantly, or so you are changing your location. I was we can say a difficult guy in my side. I have this similar situation like you. Maybe the study program is not creative for me, we can say, and I change a lot the schools or something like that. And I can understand that what brings you to be a hacker or discover the world cybersecurity.
So my background's strange. Like my parents belonged to like a small religious group that had a lot of strange rules. So they would vegetarian, and you had to do pray before your food and things like that, and kind of odd. And the reason why I ended up with the name HD is because they picked a really weird name, but they're smart enough not to put that in the birth certificate. So my birth certificate's always just been HD. So I've been going with that since early on. But so you have this kind of a weird kind of cultural background. You go to a new school and you're like, oh, I don't eat meat. Oh, I have to do this thing before I eat, all this other stuff. And of course, the kids make fun of you and beat you up and things like that, right? So, then my parents split up, bounced around all over the place, moved around no matter, with one parent or the other, grandparents or foster home for a little bit, and all the stuff in between. And, you just kind of get used to taking care of yourself at that point. And, one thing you kind of learn early on is like, you don't really have any control of your own life, especially as a kid. Like if you're under 18, like everyone else is telling you what to do and where to live and what to do, and they can put you in juvie or foster homes or drag you off or whatever, right? So you have so little freedom when you're under 18, and so little control over your life that you're kind of just stuck going with whatever the adults around you makes you do, or the police tell you to do, or whatever it is at the time. So for me, computers were like the only thing in my life I can control. And I didn't have a computer. I had to go find a computer, right? I'd go to the library, I'd find friends. Like we were super poor. So I spent probably 1993 to 1995 going through dumpsters and getting like computer parts. And I think I had like most of the parts for computer for about a year and a half before I finally got a CPU for it. And then I finally got to like turn the whole thing on the first time, and it booted at 486. But it's just one of those things, like it just took a very long time to actually get computers. But when I did get a chance to sit down in front of like an Apple IIe or like older like DOS or Mac 68Ks or whatever, it was just magical. It's like anything that goes wrong, it's your fault. Like you control it because you made the mistake, and there's no like, oh, someone else is influencing it. Like I like the fact that you control that part of your life, and you can start like really kind of building whatever you want. There's the games, of course. And as a kid, you love video games, and video games are expensive and no one has any money. So what do? You go crack them. And then you start cracking video games, and then you start sharing the key gens with your friends, and you start joining wares groups. And that kind of escalates to the point that you're now like, part of these big courier networks moving giant data files between different DS3 lines and all that stuff. So it gets really silly really quick. And then, from there you start, I guess like you're kind of already in that group. You're already kind of hanging out with all the hackers at that point. Everyone's doing shady stuff anyways. Your background is always doing illegal stuff with pirated software, between BBSs and IRC and all kind of junk like that. And so you can just kind of fall into the groups that are breaking into stuff all the time, and running backdoors, running internet scans and stuff like that. So my background early on is just my childhood was absolute crap. Moved around a lot, got beat up a lot, changed schools a lot. Was super poor, couldn't really afford anything. Didn't really have my own computer until pretty late in the game. But as a result, I just really love the computing side. And because all your friends are basically vague, casual criminals, like when you have a computer, you kind of fall into the trap of like doing that stuff too. I'd say the main trade-off is I always really liked exploring stuff, like with phone lines, like dialing, we're dialing, figuring out what's out there with, internet connections, even before internet, like playing with old AOL software back in the day. We had our own little mini proxy that would connect to the AOL client, and then kind of attacker in the middle, all the communication, and fiddle with it and use that. And so, for example, AOL had a thing where, so back then, the name of the game really was getting accounts. Like I didn't have any money to pay for an internet account too, so you had to use other people's accounts for everything. So how do you get a lot of accounts? Well, you do phishing. Well, how do you do phishing really fast? Well, you start off with a list of emails, and then you like usernames, and you ask them for their password and do fake things like that. So we found that if you mess with AOL software, you can actually pretend to be the CAT moderators, the community action team people. If you modify the message in a client to drop the window close message, you can be as part of as many chat groups as you want at the same time. Instead of being stuck with one chat window at a time, you can have 1,000 of them open at once, constantly scraping all the windows for usernames, and then just phishing people constantly, giving passwords. And then you're constantly just like disconnecting your line, dialing in another line, another people's password, and doing that forever. So early days is very much like 100% criminal because I couldn't afford anything else, and he's kind of fall into that. So kind of out of that background, I was on IRC one day just being an internet hoodlum like you are in like 15, 16, just doing silly things, and started talking to somebody. He's like, "Oh, do you want a job?" I'm like, "A job doing what?" Like the burger place wouldn't hire me last week. Like, yeah, I had a mohawk and shaved on the sides and all Liberty spikes and all that kind of stuff. And they're like, "No, yeah, they wouldn't hire you, but yeah, there's this company that may hire you, but they're down in like San Antonio at this military base." Like, okay, so I took my like car without a clutch and no air conditioning and drove down to San Antonio and interviewed for a job at the company called CSC at the time, and they hired me. So my first job was like writing exploits for the U.S. military through a contractor coming straight out of like IRC for doing hoodlum stuff. I was like, okay, I should probably like not be a hoodlum anymore. So I stopped doing all the stupid legal wares, junk, things like that. Started really focusing on learning to program better. But even then, like you kind of have to fake a little bit. Like they're like, "Do you know C?" I'm like, I can figure out C. It's not that hard. I've looked a bunch of Taso exploits, and they're like, "Okay, write this program in C." I'm like, "Crap, it's a lot of work." Like so, kind of like, especially early on, if you don't have a lot of education, you kind of have to like just say you know how to do something, and then spend the next 2 days doing nothing else but learning how to do it as quickly as you possibly can. And I didn't really go to a lot of school either. Like I went to a lot of high schools, but I mostly dropped out for most of high school. I came back and graduated from alternative school in about 6 months at the very end of it. But I wasn't really doing a lot of book learning, right? It was all just on the internet, downloading stuff, playing with things, running Linux, Slackware at home, things like that. Um, yeah, so it's kind of like that kind of background of just kind of not really having a lot, having to get really creative with what you do have. I would say one of the harder things in today's world is it's really difficult to get bored. And I feel like being bored is a really great way to start stuff. Like Metasploit started because I was bored. I was sitting in a house with no internet, about to move. The only thing I had with me was a laptop and a big case of MSDN CD-ROMs from all the OSs. So I started ripping all the cab files off all the CD-ROMs, putting them into the hard drive, unpacking the cab files, dumping all the COM IDs and the looking for shellcode gadgets, things like that. And that actually became like one of the very first Metasploit projects. Was actually a big database of all the MSDN Windows binaries to build better exploits and to build better shellcode. And that kind of just rolls forward. So these days, I think it's so hard to be bored. Like every 10 seconds, something's flickering on your screen, dragging you down something else. Like, I'd say if you feel like you're stuck in a rut and you aren't able to kind of create anything, and you really feel like you want to create something, easiest way to do that is go into a room, turn everything off, the notepad, and just sit there for 2 hours. Be bored out of your absolute mind, and you will come up with the most amazing projects.
So then I want to say something also from my side, and maybe you have the same problem as me. I am most of the time busy doing things, thinking things, preparing something, new certification, new study of software, or something like that. Always I am busy with something, and more is your case because also you are running a company that can be crazy, right? And one of the things happens to me, I try to be bored sometimes. I try to do like don't do nothing, 2 days, 3 days, because it's where I believe, like in my point of view, is where you can grow with new ideas, like new things, new points of view of problems, of solutions to something like that. And I believe like someone like you and I, we are very motivated people, we can say. Try to find a place to be you, right? Only for find yourself like a couple of days, something like that. And if someone have family or something like that, don't touch your computer, don't touch your phone in 2 days. I believe it's like crazy. I believe it's like give you the possibility to stay away. At least in my case, I don't know if you have the same feeling.
One of the tricks I use for it is like exercise. So I go run as far as I possibly can until I can't really run anymore, and then I'm like 2-3 miles away from home, and I gotta like walk back. And then walking back takes so long, you have to kind of think about stuff and all that. So kind of force myself to do like a long walk just because too tired to run back at that point and too far away to get home.
That's crazy because I started to run like that. I did the same because I believe running is the best place to find yourself, at least in my point, because you don't have the chance to stay with your phone or with your computer or something like that. That at the beginning maybe can be boring because it's like you are tired easy, but when you can have the possibility to run like kilometers, it's funny because you're gonna stay there like for 1 hour thinking your stuff. For me, it's very, very like how do I say? like a religion because you was talking about your family before or something like that. And one thing I wanted to mention something like you was talking like, well, I come from a poor family. Maybe that's true, and maybe don't have money at the moment, but we can say thanks to that situation is what you are, and thanks to that we have Metasploit. Then I believe it's not a bad point. And also, I went to you was talking like you started working in cybersecurity for we can say government or something like that. And how was your beginning there? Like a strange guy there, like you get the bullying, or is like force yourself to study more, or how was there like because I believe like that situation from like you because you come from not a very technical background. I believe like technical from your side, but you don't come to someone teach you to do something only for community, not university. And I believe in that moment when we were younger, it was very different because everyone have degrees and master degrees and super degrees and more if you are working on that. Like I believe that like 6 months ago, the government retired the be mandatory have a degree for working the but back in the days, I believe was mandatory in that side that maybe put you in the position like I need to push myself harder than other people and and something like that. I don't know. I want to listen your story at that point.
Sure. I mean, that's the reason why I started companies, right? No one would hire me. Like, I didn't have a degree. I barely did high school. I knew the technical side, but I had to go buy a polo shirt because I didn't have any clothes that were not like Jinkos and raggedy t-shirts. So I had to go like buy all the nice clothes for my first job because I had nothing, right? And buy the shoes, like so. Try not to look like a thug when I showed up, basically. Uh, so um, because especially in the early 2000s, if you wanted a job doing anything that paid well, you'd have to go have a degree, you'd have to have college or a lot of experience. If you're 17, 18 years old and self-taught, like good luck, right? So the short version is I started my own companies. The longer version is I got paid very little for a long time. So I think my first company, I think when I was at CSE, I effectively made about $40,000 a year, which is really good when you're like 17, but not great for like a professional programmer even then. And then my first company, I think I took like a $35,000 a year salary, and I didn't really get paid much more than that for a very long time. It took like 5, 6 years till I even had like a middle of the road salary. But I liked the work. Like I was just working continuously. Like we're doing pen test all day, and I was writing code for it all night. So all day long, you go out there and you like break into stuff, then you go spend all night writing code to make it faster, better. Built a phone scanner, doing checks, writing more exploits, doing Metasploit stuff. So it's kind of a fire hose in that sense. So I mean, I definitely don't hold it against anybody if they've got a degree. Like I work with a bunch of really smart people now, and about half of them have degrees, about half of them don't. And it doesn't really matter. Like end of the day, it's like these days it's much easier to get a job without a degree. But back then, that probably was one of the biggest drivers for why I didn't like try to apply at Google or work for a big tech company. Is like they wouldn't hire me. Like I didn't have the degree, I had the background. They'd be like, "Who's this random kid with no experience?" So the only way around that is you start your own company, and that's a good way to kind of force it, right? At least you can hire yourself.
I had the same background. I started my own company in 21 because no one is trust on me.
Yeah,
And I did the same. And I have the same background as you because, as you mentioned, I believe when you was born in 1981 or something like that,
yeah.
I believe we are almost the same age. And it's different, similar stories in different places. But I believe like many hackers of our age have similar stories because, or we are someone like, do you like study? And I believe school is not for me. Maybe when I was younger, and now it's different because I have the passion and I can read and understand the things. But I believe in the beginning, it's like what's so hard for us because at least here in Spain, it's impossible to find a career for uh, engineering of technology. It's like more here, it's like more in how can I say telecommunications or something like that. And the approach about that is like can be boring and maybe not many good teachers at the time, and it's what's hard for us. But I believe also was cool because we did things like you mentioned, like improve the creativity. And also here, I want to move to the next question is like, give you the opportunity to understand what the bad actors are doing behind of the cybersecurity. And that's gives you the possibility to understand what is happening around the bad world, right? I don't know if you have the contact to understand how the phishing is working and how the bad actors are working, how scheming are working, and about that. Because at least in my age was something very, 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 very common. When you work in hacking, you work in the criminal place. I don't know in your side.
Yeah, I think early on, like most of the stuff I knew in like the early 2000s was stuff that people were doing that. Other hackers I knew were doing those things, right? That's how you know how it works. Is they talk about it. You talk to your friends. They're like, "Oh yeah, I broke into this thing using this method. It's pretty cool." Or you share it on Bug Track, another mailing list. I think by the time we got to about 2005, though, things kind of flipped. Like a lot of folks would blame Metasploit for releasing exploits that are used by bad actors. Like we put an exploit out and then people get hacked. But by about 2005 to 2006 or so, it kind of flipped around the other way around, where 0 days were being exploited online, and then Metasploit would add coverage for it. And so we would add. We're basically trying to keep up with the bad actors. Like we were no longer publishing first. We were constantly chasing everybody else to say, hey, if you want to test out this exploit that's already being actively exploited in the wild, you can now use Metasploit for it. Where before we're saying, here's a vulnerability you should be aware of, and then maybe people could use it. And I think that trend has continued. Like even today, like most of the major vulnerabilities you see coming through, they're identified by being exploited in the wild first, and then all the security tools keep up, right? So it's shifted a little bit where we're early on, most people who are building security products had a security background or hacking background, and they're working kind of firsthand knowledge of how they would do things. Within the last 15 years or so, it's very much the other way around. You have to kind of study and observe real attackers to understand how they're doing stuff, and your own experience is no longer relevant anymore in terms of how people go about breaking into things. Because if you're a hacker from the 90s, you're not breaking into stuff to get money. You're just kind of fun, having fun and going around and looking at stuff. But most of the bad actors these days, they're doing it for a very specific financial reason, ransomware, extortion, data theft, et cetera. And so it's a different kind of trade-offs. Like the things that someone would do for a ransomware attack are not what like you and I would have thought to do in 1999 to break into something, because the trade-offs are different. You don't need to have domain admin anymore. You just need to have encryption keys for BitLocker. Like you don't need to take over all the data. You just need to get access to their Microsoft tenant and control their BitLocker key. So all the trade-offs are a lot different. So I think these days, if you want to be successful at stopping attackers, you really do have to study what they were doing in the real world. And there's no longer like just chatting with your friends to see how they do it, because what you do as a pen tester is now a lot less relevant to day-to-day attacks than it used to be.
Totally agree with you, because that's something I try to explain to the companies, like, because most of the companies are running adversary relations, and most of the companies, or maybe the pen testers, don't know the tools that adversary are using in the real world. When you talk about SQL dump or some encryptors the criminals are using in the world that people don't know, and I don't know at the moment when you are working as a pen tester, I don't know if you had the chance to work sometimes to adversary relation, someone hire you to do that.
It's hard to keep up with it, right? Because you read all the news articles, you kind of read stories, you read incident reports. At work, we help out customers all the time who have an incident. We figure out how we can help them out and try to help them piece things together. We try to figure out how did someone get in, where do they go from there, all the lateral movement stuff. So, I mean, having a background helps, but the way people do attacks these days is a lot different, especially with all your cloud services and SaaS. Like your traditional, SIM event discovery doesn't really work very well unless you take a different approach to it. I would say what's really helped out me personally is running a personal honeypot network. So I've got a bunch of IP space that I just look at all the traffic coming in and fiddle with it. And it's really cool to see what people are doing. It's also really cool because all the other security researchers that are scanning the internet for stuff, they send me all their payloads. I'm like, oh, what are you looking for? This is cool. So you basically get to like, look at what everyone else is doing research on too, which is really neat. That's not necessarily the bad actors as it is just kind of background traffic. So I love kind of seeing like, running a honey net, seeing what traffic is coming into it, getting a sense for what other people are looking for. If I see a payload coming across the wire that I don't know what it is, I'll go spend a weekend figuring it out, because like I want to know what that is. Is that a really cool, is it a new exploit? Is it a cool discovery technique? Is it just noise? But there's companies like Gray Noise that do a really good job of that, where they run like a huge distributed honey net, and then they do the analysis work to figure out what exploits are people triggering. Is it an older bug? Is it a newer bug? Is it a variant? So some of the Gray Noise blog posts are really good for figuring out like how attackers are actually exploiting stuff in the real world. Other than that, you're kind of stuck relying on what companies put in their blogs and your own direct research.
That's a very, very interesting point of view, because always I explain to the companies it's very, very interesting to have a honeypot, but trust me, here at least I don't know many companies are running honeypots. It's sad because it's a way you can find like easy information for free, right?
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, like we can get your payloads for free. That it's important, but and also I want to talk about, you are at the moment you are running your own company, okay? But I believe your company is better. You can explain what are you doing in your company.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So this is my first company, like where I started literally from scratch and just myself the first couple of years. So previously, I just started a company with other people as first employee. There's more than just me there. This is the first time I said, you know what, I just want to do the whole thing front to back. I want to know everything there is to be about starting a company from scratch. So about almost 6 years ago, started RunZero. At the time, it was called Rumble, and the idea was like we wanted to help people find all their stuff. The reason for it is I was doing pen test work prior to that, and every single time we did a pen test and we were successful at breaking in for these large companies, we got into something they didn't know about. And they're like, well, why didn't I know about the server? Well, it's not in my vulnerability management scope, or we don't have an EDR in that machine. There's no visibility into it. So the recurring theme was that the best way to break into companies that already take security seriously is to find the things they don't know about, because obviously they can't protect them, they don't know where they are, and that's usually kind of the soft spot. So RunZero started off being, how do we help people find all the stuff that they don't know about? And so we do a lot of really clever network scanning to identify stuff that, networks you didn't know about, weird devices. We can find multi-home interfaces. We can look at like network pivoting, layer two infrastructure, like the kind of the best network discovery tool you can ever imagine. Basically, is where we started. Over the last few years, we started adding passive discovery, so you can put span ports, background traffic, and also integrations. So we can now import like your cloud inventory. We can import your EDR, your vulnerability management scans, all your other parts of your organization, then overlay all on top of each other. And the great thing about that is once you have that full visibility into like the network side and all your integrations in cloud, you can say, what of my machines don't have an EDR or missing an agent? What networks are not being scanned on my vuln scanner? Which devices are completely off the radar of my security team and my security controls, or not on my IPAM or not part of my CMDB. So that combination of doing like really, really deep network discovery with great fingerprinting overlaid on top of the integrations really helps people find all their stuff really quickly. So starting the company, it was just, I wanted to take the first crack at everything. So I did everything for the first couple of years. Basically a single person company for about 2.5 years got us to almost $1 million of revenue just by myself at that point. But it was tough. Like was not sleeping. I was running the servers and doing the invoices and doing customer support and doing all the outbound sales, everything in between, right? So you're just doing everything. So I started, brought in some folks, raised a little bit of money to make it easier to hire them. I was always very scared to hire people because I didn't want to like not be able to pay them. I want to make sure I had money to pay them, right? So when I first brought on some employees, like, okay, it probably makes sense to raise a little bit of money just to have a buffer to pay them in case we have a bad quarter. I can still do payroll. They don't have to worry about losing their jobs. So that was really the initial motivation for raising money. We kept growing and got more customers. So I think we had 100 and something odd customers about 2 years in. These days we're around 500 customers overall. We also like really care about the community and the small business side. So we have a free version, the community edition, which is free for anybody for under 100 assets. So if you're like a small laundromat or retail or home lab, feel free to set up a free version of RunZero and play with it forever. It's a really neat way for us to help the community while also improving fingerprint discovery for everybody else too, through kind of like a crowdsourced fingerprinting model. But yeah, during that process, like I learned all the horrible things that go wrong with starting companies, like all the paperwork you have to do, all the legal side. How do you do accounting? We went through like 4 bookkeepers. We fired 3 of them in a row because they just could not do our books. We went through 4 different law firms where they just could not do their work. Like the third law firm we hired, 2 days afterwards, I got a phishing attack from them. And I was like, dude, you've already managed to lose. Like they got phished, and then someone basically went after all their clients. And this law firm is in California. I was like, hey, you got breached. You need to tell people you got breached. He's like, no, we didn't. I'm like, dude, you got breached. Like, so even like the law firm that we tried to work with, like, wasn't really following the law. We're like, we're not going to work with you. So it took us a very long time to find reliable vendors for bookkeeping, accounting, tax prep, legal advice that we could rely on. Most of the folks we tried working with, even some of the big names, were just horrible. Just could not do the work for us, or missed the timelines, or were really expensive, or all of the above. So it took a really long time to find companies we could work with. But in the meantime, I had to figure out how to do payroll. I had to figure out how to do all the accounting side, all the state registrations. I thought it'd be easy to hire people remotely. Like during COVID, of course, like we don't have an office, we're fully remote. How do you hire people in any state in the US? Well, it's easy, you just hire them, right? Except for you also do all the state paperwork. So if you hire an employee in Nevada, hire another employee in California, Ohio, you name it, every one of those states wants you to file like 4 or 5 different types of registrations. So you have to file for unemployment insurance, you have to register in the state registry. Sometimes you have to file for state income or state sales tax, depending on whether it's origination or destination based state. So all that paperwork comes here. So I have this box of paperwork about this tall just from the last month that all comes to my house because we have people in 33 states, and all being a remote company, like you don't really think about like, where do all the checks go? Where do all the paperwork go? And so it goes to your house. Like, there's no middle ground. There's no magic solution for the stuff besides you get a bunch of paperwork, you open all the envelopes, you go through all the forms, you fill them out, and you do the work. So one thing I learned through this process was that, just like learning exploits or shellcode or new architectures is hard. The business side's not that different. Like, it's really scary. You are terrified of getting it wrong. But it's, if you know how to write code, you can also run a business. It's just learning it like anything else. It's so one of the things that I think worked really well here is that I wouldn't hire someone for a role until I'd at least done some of the work myself for a long time. So we didn't hire accounting people until I'd already been doing accounting for a bit. We didn't hire someone to help out with, sales that had already been doing sales for a while. And that was really useful because at least I knew who to hire. One challenge that founders often have is you say, great, I don't know sales, I'm technical, I need to find someone really, really good at sales. But how do you know that they're good at sales? Like, they can tell you all the things in the world, but like, do you know they're actually good? Do they know how to sell the product? Like, you have to kind of take other people's word for it unless you've done the work yourself and you can, get a good sense for it based on your own experience. So I felt it was really important to get at least a little bit of experience with every single part of the business before I hire somebody for the role.
That's a very interesting point of view. But also, something you can do, in my point of view, if you permit me, like in my case, I run a lot sometimes after my experience. Some projects, it's very difficult to know about that, and you need to find a good team, right? And same as you mentioned, one of the things maybe you can do from your side, if you want to find someone in marketing, maybe you can find a growth partner and go in partnership. Like, that can be a good idea. But anyway, moving forward from that point, because I believe it, like, we are talking about hacking. Like, if you need a security professionals here in Spain, we have incredible professionals. We win the last HackerOne competition, and we have Carlos Padop. He is a very famous. We have David Melendez. We have incredible professionals here in cybersecurity, hacking, bug bounty. And if someday you need someone, only send me a message because I can send you someone. No? And the good thing here is, like, I believe many people, it's like a dream. Have the possibility to work with someone like you, because I believe, like, everyone know Metasploit and know your background, and can be like a dream for most of the people. The same as you mentioned, like, here in cybersecurity, keep your how I can say, keep your soul still working on that after years and years is a difficult part, because when you are younger, it's easy to get this motivation, right? But when you are getting older, like, your business or maybe your mentality is moving to another way, and can be hard. And I understand your point, and sometimes the people can be how to say, like, tired, or maybe want to change the point of view. But anyway, something I want to say is, like, I believe it's like something you mentioned is very important, and you was talking before, is about bug bounty. And about my position in bug bounty is like, okay, bug bounty is okay, but the bad thing is, like, we are keeping out, or maybe we are not giving the possibility to many pen testers working, and maybe bad payer, because maybe if I find a vulnerability, maybe hacker was gonna pay me like 3,000, and this in the dark market, maybe someone gonna pay me 30,000 for the same vulnerability. Then can be hard for that person try to find the motivation, or maybe do the white hat hacking, right? Then I want to know about also, the polemics we had like 3 months or 4 months ago about bug bounty, like, it's a scam about that. I want, if you have the possibility, to give me your opinion about that, and what do you think about that? From my point of view, I want to start here. It can be a playground, bug bounty can be a playground, but not a professional place. But also want to understand your opinion.
I mean, I love that bug bounties exist. I feel like some of the programs are now being used to silence researchers more so than anything else. They're really just used as a way to, like, prevent stuff from getting posted on PacketStorm, right? They're diverting public discourse in some cases. Now, not every company's like that, but I definitely worked with bug bounty programs where their number one priority was making sure I didn't talk about it, and that doesn't really help anybody. But I'm glad they exist, right? And the alternative is that there'd be no way for folks to learn this stuff. But I agree, like, it's not necessarily competitive, especially with Western salaries for pen testing work these days to do bug bounty work. You either have to be amazing and do it full time and be really, really good at picking the right bounties. Not even just good at, like, security and breaking into stuff, but, like, knowing how the bug bounty programs are paying out and knowing that ecosystem really well. It's kind of critical if you want to make more than you would make as a salaried consultant for any firm or doing your own consulting services. So on one hand, I'm really thankful that these programs exist and they do that. On the other hand, like you said, it's also kind of taking the bottom of the market out, and it's making it difficult for folks who want to provide high quality security testing or deep code reviews from selling services to somebody who's like, no, we already have a good bug bounty program for it. So then again, I think like just like anything else in security, some people care about security and the outcome. Some people just want to check the box and say, I've done the thing. So if you're a company who, you've got a requirement that you have an annual pen test and you don't actually care about the pen test, you'll go find the cheapest option, whether it's bug bounty based, crowdsourced, or just a Nessus scan someone's calling a pen test. There's a million ways you can not pay for that. But then again, if you're a company that really cares about the security of your product, like you make a security product, you want to make sure it's super secure, like those other options are not really going to appeal to you. You're going to go find a really talented team, work with that team directly, give them everything you possibly can to get the most value you can out of it, and you'll pay $50,000 to $60,000 for a product audit, but it'll be worth it because your product will be that much better. So I think kind of my takeaway for the whole industry is like the reason why I stay excited every day is I'm here for our customers, right? For the users, people who actually like the person in charge of running the network and not getting hacked and keeping their stuff functional and keeping their customers and their end users' data private. I want to make sure that they're able to do their jobs and we can support them. So when I look at like how secure is our product, well, that's really important. Like if we ship a product that is insecure to our customers, we're making their security worse. We're creating this downstream risk to everybody else. So that's really important. I will say in the last probably last 10 years, more importantly, we've seen a big shift of not security people starting security companies because they think it's a good market. I had a couple folks reach out on LinkedIn just about 6 months ago saying, "Hey, we're from finance. We're a couple of finance bros. We hear that security is the hot thing. We want to start a security company. What do we do?" I was like, "Dude, don't start a security company. Like, please do not. We have enough. Like, you want people who care about the customer outcome and who really care about the technology and the people in the process running these things. You don't want folks coming in just to make a quick buck on it." And so it's kind of annoying that like security has now become so trendy in such a big market that folks are doing it just because they feel like that's what the market opportunity is, not because that's where their heart is. And it's something I think about all the time here. Like you said, like don't lose your soul. It's very similar. Like at RunZero every day, it's very much like I want to make sure our customers are safe. I want to make sure our code is safe. Like I don't think we can be a security company while shipping insecure software. So we take all that stuff really seriously. And if we have any mistakes whatsoever, we come clean with it and transparent as quickly as we can to everybody. So we have like 2 or 3 really minor things where we had information leak here and there. We went through and tracked down every single person who could have seen that leak, reached out to them, said, here's what happened, why it happened, and so on. And we just try to be really, really transparent with it. Where I think your standard software company who sold security products, they wouldn't have bothered. They would have said, yeah, there was a bug, it's fine. Now it's good. So anyways, long rambling answer. I think bug bounties are good for the world, but not necessarily great for the security market.
Yeah, that's a very good opinion. Also, you just mentioned like everyone is want to run now a cybersecurity company because the people don't understand how tough can be created that. That's why I believe your experience on that can be very, very, very important for many people, and that's why I bring you here. Not only for Metasploit, of course, it's important for everyone, but also your background as creating a company, like having the pain of the papers, same as you as mentioned before, like the people don't understand, like, because many people confuse the opportunity to be a freelancer to create a company, and it's not the same. Okay, when you are running people, and same you mentioned, like you're hiring people, you need to make your confidence in that person, put your money in that person, because finally you are doing investment in someone. Maybe for 1 hour meeting, or 2 hour meeting sometimes happens, and that can be a difficult point, or because most of when we are working in cybersecurity, we don't trust with anyone. It's like something we have. I have that problem. It's something I need to fight every day to trusting my family, trusting in my couple, trusting and everyone, because can be, and more when you are a project manager in my case, right? Because I need to handle project for many people and need to trust in that people. Like can be the work in that time and everything, and can be so hard when you are working in cybersecurity. The difference between be a freelancer and create a company is a huge step. I believe you have this, you experience this situation. I believe so, for the thing you are explaining before, and that's why you want to know about a little bit of at least from every part of the business to understand what the people are doing, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it can be your way to control it. Really what they are doing, right? Something like that. But also we are the last 10 minutes, and something I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk with you is like, what are you thinking about cybersecurity and the future of cybersecurity with artificial intelligence? It's coming and pushing and punching all the face of everyone, and everything today have yeah, or artificial intelligence in every, like the pursuit. You have like artificial intelligence and everything. And I want to know your opinion about that, and what do you think about the future and how can impact in the business? Because I have a friend of mine here in Spain. He's creating a ChatGPT or maybe with AI to assist you to do the pen testing and everything. What do you think in the future? And also, how can be used for the criminals to take profit of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I tend to be the last person to adopt any new technology. Like I start using Go for programming when it's like 10 years old, like or pretty late in the game. Like so, I'm usually very slow to adopt technology because old school, distrustful, all that kind of fun stuff. So AI so far, I don't really see the value of it yet. I'm sure there is value somewhere, but I don't think it's one of those things you just apply to every business and hope something falls out of it. That's good. I think we're starting to see things gel a little bit. We're starting to see like the clear use cases where it makes sense and the ones where it doesn't. So where I like um, the area that I like AI and security right now is when you can directly measure the results without involving a human. So how do you know it's correct? And if you know it's correct because you can, my favorite example is Google's work with the OSS fuzzing framework and LLMs. They used LLMs to generate test cases for the fuzzers to get better code coverage. And how do you know it works? Because you have a shell, because it found a bug. You found a net new bug, right? So I think any scenario where you can apply AI to a problem where you can directly measure the output and automatically without involving a human say, yes, it worked, no, it didn't work, those are great. Anything where you expect the user to spot check the results and then make a decision about, is this good? Do I need to get involved? Like you didn't really need the AI in the first place. Like, in a lot of cases, if you need an AI to do the work, you're not qualified to determine if it was correct. And if you're qualified to know that it's correct, you didn't need the AI to do the work. So you have this kind of like problem with using these tools where if you are able to review the output and determine the quality, you didn't need to do it in the first place. It was a waste of time. And if you don't have the ability to review the output and review the quality from your own skill set, you're going to do something dangerous, and you need to be really careful where you use it. That's my view. I think I would love there to be better outcomes. I like that we're starting to finally kind of find a groove for where people are using LLMs with like the RAG stuff, the vector DBs, the kind of all that fun stuff. But I don't think it really changes anything in the near term.
But also, the point I also believe is very, very important. Like one of the things I believe, like that's true, and it's a fact. Like the people use artificial intelligence in the day by day working is 30% more efficient than the people that usually use. For example, you work as me, and so many times we got like hundreds of emails, and the possibility to summarize like that's sick. In my case, like helped me a lot. And also when I need to write some email and you don't have a point, and you get it and you do a fast idea and like, okay, improve this text or something like that can be awesome, no? But same you mentioned before, like it's important to know if it's true or because in some stupid case you can write with your email and you can say, hey, you can improve this text, and the result is like crap. It's like this is not what I'm talking about, and that's why I believe it's important to know what you are doing behind. But also in another point of view, like I believe like the bad thing here, like the actors can use artificial intelligence, and it's very interesting for create fake chat, for scamming, create phishing, and also for create some simple exploits or phishing campaigns. Like that's the bad thing. And I don't know if your day by day you can start to finding these things, like in your when you get low, you find you working with your customers, you are finding these things like because in my case I found some cases. I don't know if you are experiencing the same situation.
Yeah, we had one recently where somebody took a press release that we put out, basically, what do you call, hijacked it basically. So they took the press release that we launched, they put it through an AI or LM to regenerate it. They rebranded it, made it their own thing, put it on their website, saying, "Look, we have this." And they use that to basically get hits to their website because they're following the news cycle. So they're basically taking everyone else's press releases and blogs, retranslating them, taking credit for it, and republishing it to get the hits and redirecting all that traffic back to their stuff. That's an example of just I ran into personally in the last few weeks that we had to go to get the sites taken down, things like that. Um, so I think that type of stuff has been happening for a while. I do think it's going to make it easier for phishing attacks for sure. Like, just people are not that good at telling things apart, and so you know, um, yeah, it's like using LMs to generate more credible phishing and landing pages and text, things like that, or even like doing like the pig butchering scams automatically. Just using the chat bot to like drag out the conversation and run all that for a while would be a way to get there quicker. Um, I mean, overall though, I think you know I feel like the places where AI is going to be most helpful are when you can directly measure their impact still without the human loop. So, like doing AI pen testing, if you can, it doesn't necessarily matter what the AI pen testing tool recommends. what does it actually do? Can it actually go run the attack? Can it actually go try the shell? Can it actually try the thing and get the result? I think that's probably the important part. Anytime you can like measure the output, I think is going to be where this stuff is going to become a lot more useful. Yeah, I'm probably skeptical on it. I feel like a lot of the natural language stuff where it says like, tell the chatbot what you want it to do and it'll give you instructions. Like every time I try to use that stuff, I get, it's kind of being insecurity and being perfectionist, right? The answer is always wrong. It always comes back slightly misexplaining something or telling me to do slightly the wrong thing. I'm like, no, like it costs me more time to look at the result and review it than it would have been just to Google something real quick and figure it out myself. So unfortunately now when you Google something, you're also getting AI chatbot garbage output. So now you're getting Reddit telling you to put glue on your pizza or whatever, right? So it's, I mean, the worst thing about, you talked earlier about having AI to summarize an email. But the funny thing about that is all the people who are sending the emails are using AI to write them. So now essentially we're like writing 2 lines of text, sending an LM out, then someone's receiving the text using LM to bring it back in again. Like, how about we just not send email? Like,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That I agree. But also, for you was talking about how you can use it, right? But I can give you an example of someone. When you and I was younger, for create exploit, to know how to coding, how to understand the code, what you are creating. But today, if you are a normal guy, when you can take the website, you can take the code, you can put in your ChatGPT or whatever, and you can say, hey, this software is insecure, and can tell you, yes, if this have a bug here, you can do XSS, whatever, right? Okay, you can explain me how I can take profit of that. And the chat is giving you the solution and give you the payload. And it's for for phishing, like in the point of view, because I talk about phishing because 75% of attacks come from phishing. And that means like if someone want to create like some web poisoning or something like that, it's very easy. Only you can do like that with artificial intelligence, or you can find endpoints, or maybe someone say, hey, can you help me to find endpoints? Can be able to do a SQL injection in this website, or you can create a Python tool, can do it. Maybe Python is not the bad one, but ChatGPT is working very fine, better in Python than Go. And if you send it, gonna create a tool is like useful for do that. And that's the part of, I believe, like it's important to start to understand how the people can use it and how it can be powerful for the future for cybersecurity. Not only for you and I, because we have background and we have ton of experience, and you, of course, better than me. But this is at the point, like we are giving the possibility to the maybe can do democratic side of the criminals or something like that. And also, same you was mentioning in big batchering, like today is creating a mini bot for big batchering, right? And creating people and creating fake models. Here the case of Aitana, it's like a fake model created in Barcelona. She make like $10,000 monthly in one platform, like for other platform, and that's something like creating. Maybe you can create with the technology of today. You can create a fake girlfriend. You can send message, and after maybe 2 months, you can ask for the person for $300, and you can send to the one. And that's the bad thing, like, because how you can, if you are the authority here, I had a connection with some police here, and say this is so hard because how you do the traceability of the money, because that person sell the money. It's not a hacking, and that's a dangerous thing, because the police or the authorities cannot do nothing with that. And that's why I am afraid about the technology and artificial intelligence, because you can create phishing, and whatever. And I believe at that moment, like you and I are people working in cybersecurity, we have a huge responsibility to explain to the people what is happening and what's going to happen in the future, right? And how to explain to the people how you act, or what do you need to do when you are phishing attack a victim or something like that. I always try to explain to the people, okay, you have a secure sentence with your family, or secure question or something like that. It's like, no, I don't have it. Like, I believe it's like the people need to start to understand that, because like a few days ago I was playing around with Runway. And if you never play with Runway, try to put your picture and say you can create movement of that face. Like, it's crazy, and that's like the improvements in 2 years. I don't know what's gonna happen in 5 years, no. And that's why I believe, like, the side where we are, it's important for artificial intelligence. I believe that's why it's important your point and your company start to working on that. That's why it's coming the question. And I don't know if you are working in some software to detect fake or deep fakes or something like that.
The democratizing like security and software. Like, one of my kids is 15 and they're doing programming, and I was like, "Hey, do you want help like learning how to do this stuff?" It's like, "No, no, 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 I'll figure it out myself." They just don't want to look dumb. They don't want to feel like they don't know it, but they're very happy to go use like Replit, like the Replit online code gen, to go play with that through the LM and do coding, because they don't feel like they're being judged. They don't feel like, oh, my dad doesn't think I'm smart because I can't figure this thing out. So I like the fact that folks are able to like interact with these LMs to learn stuff in a way that doesn't feel like they're being judged by a mentor or a teacher or something like that. So I definitely see the value of that, for being able to learn on your own in a way that doesn't feel quite as like pressured, I guess.
That's a very good point. I never realized about that, and it's very interesting too. Because I don't have kids.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to me. It's like I write code all day long. I'll hang out with you and we'll go through the code. It's like, no, no, no. It was kind of like they didn't want to like feel dumb, basically.
Yeah, I can understand perfectly the procedure, because we was younger and we have something like similar. Then, man, HD, like, it's was my pleasure, to keep you here. And I believe like we have 1 hour talking. I believe it was a very, very interesting talk together. And it was my pleasure. I don't want to steal more of your time, because it's like, for me, it's like a dream to have a conversation with you. And thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for accepting my invitation. And I hope to see you soon here, maybe.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Albert. This is a lot of fun.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.